CTA Transformational Tuesdays with Dr. Paul White. There is a lot to say about Dr. Paul today, actually. It's a very rich bio, Dr. Paul. It's wonderful. Let me first introduce Dr. Paul to you, then we will discuss what Dr. Paul is going to share today in this presentation. Actually, Dr. Paul White is a psychologist, author, speaker, and leadership trainer who makes work relationships work. He has written actually many articles, and has been interviewed by Bloomberg, Business Week, CNN, Fortune, Entrepreneur, Fast Company, Fox Business, Huffington Post, Live News, and World Report, and Yahoo Finance. He's actually co-author of the best-selling The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace, which he has sold about over 500 copies with Dr. Gary Chapman. Actually, Dr. White and Dr. Chapman have developed practical ways for leaders and employees to communicate authentic appreciation that leads to increased employee engagement, lower staff turnover, more positive work environments, and higher productivity. Their appreciation at work training resource and online training course and the motivating by appreciation inventory have been used by numerous corporations, medical facilities, schools, and nonprofit organizations, and government agencies, over 750 colleagues and universities, and in over 60 countries. Dr. Paul White, as a speaker, he has taught hundreds or thousands of people around the world. It includes North America, Europe, South America, Asia, and the Caribbean. His expertise has been requested by NASA, by Facebook, by Microsoft, by many actually famous organizations. He has been actually invited as a presenter to the World Business Executive Coaching Summit multiple times, WebEx, and has been actually attended by 1,000 individuals. He had just recently completed research with 200,000 employees worldwide, examining preferences of appreciation for on-site and the remote employees pre-COVID-19 and during COVID-19 pandemic. So actually a lot to tell about Dr. Paul White today, but in this presentation specifically, Dr. Paul is going to take us through the remote working and appreciation. The remote employees. You know that recently a lot of employees are working now remotely with organizations, and specifically currently with COVID-19. So Dr. White is going to share common misconceptions leaders often hold about appreciation, how both leaders and colleagues can encourage one another in the ways meaningful to each person, the practical benefits to the organization when team members feel truly valued and appreciated, and the key components to supporting and encouraging remote employees. So welcome, Dr. Paul.
Thank you, Mahmoud. I'm glad to be with you all today. And, it'd be interesting to me and my team if those of you that are participating here might share what country you're coming in from and dialing in from. This is a unique opportunity to a different region that I don't always get to serve, so I'm excited about that. Let's dive in and get going here. Let's see, I'm gonna minimize some things here. So I think it's a little bit about me. I am a psychologist. I'm pretty straightforward and practical. I just sort of tell the things the way they are. And I am from the Midwest. I'm from the Midwestern part, which is the farming part. And we're sort of known of just being just sort of straightforward, to tell you what you to think, what we think about things. And as a result, I may challenge some of your thinking of things that, especially for business leaders, lots of times our approach is different than what they've heard previously. And I like to have fun. So it's a little bit challenging with humor cross-culturally. I understand that. But nonetheless, I have a few cartoons I'd like to share, and hopefully some of them will hit the mark. this guy gets an award. It says not our worst employee. And he says, just the same, it's nice to get an award. And unfortunately, sometimes big organizations or organizations that think they're supposed to give awards and can't think of anything to do for a person, he gets this. And that's not what we want to do. We want to get past that. So I am going to talk about appreciation. We're going to sort of lay the foundation for understanding remote employees. So we've got to sort of deal with the foundational issues first. And so I found dealing with some major misconceptions is a good way to start. First of all, there's a misconception about the relationship between recognition and appreciation. Often when I'm talking to someone or a group and I mention appreciation, they automatically think about recognition and employee recognition. And there is an overlap between the two, but as we talk about it, they're really different. And so I just want to sort of confirm that when we're talking about employee recognition, it's not the same. It's not equal to authentic appreciation. They overlap some, but they're not the same. Our book, The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace, the average business book in the United States sells 3,000 copies. We've been privileged to sell 500,000 copies and sell about 1,000 a week. So I'm thankful for that. Here's another sort of comic about recognition in the workplace. And this guy says, every time you do something right, I will punch, sort of hole punch your rewards card. And when you reach 10,000 punches, you earn a high five. And unfortunately, in a lot of places, that's what recognition is about, is you have to do a lot of little things to get not much more. And it just feels sort of like what we would say is a mouse on a turning wheel. It just keeps running. And again, that's not what we want to do. We want to get past that. Now, in the United States, North America, Western Europe, about 90% or more of organizations have some form of employee recognition program. It can be quite small in the sense of just getting maybe an email on their birthday, but others have very elaborate ones. I spoke to Prudential Life Insurance Company, about 300 leaders last week, and then Pepsi, and they have a very elaborate kind of employee recognition program. But the issue is that most employee recognition programs don't work in this way. They don't work in making individuals feel appreciated. And the reason is that that's not what they were designed for. They were designed back in the 60s and 70s to improve performance, to help people reach goals, to be recognized and rewarded for achievements. And that's what they're about. And even teams, so a group meeting their quarterly goal and so forth. But people can and do get recognized, and that doesn't necessarily make them feel valued individually. And so when organizations try to use recognition for that purpose, it not only fails, but it often creates some negative reactions because people feel like it's not very genuine or personal, which it's not. Recognition isn't designed to be that way. Now, 65% of North Americans report that they've received no recognition or no appreciation at their workplace in the past year. And when I saw this, I'm thinking, how can this be? Because we have got all of these employee recognition programs. I think the key aspect here is that they haven't received the recognition or appreciation, meaning that somebody maybe did something, said something, but it didn't really get to them. It didn't have any impact on them. So it's sort of like here in the States, I just sent a gift to a relative to be shipped by Amazon. Well, if it doesn't get there, they didn't receive it. So even though I meant well, they didn't receive it. So there's a gap there. Now, let me just mention, because I know I'm speaking to an international group, that most of the research I'm cited is from the US, but our materials are used in over 60 countries. They're in several languages. And we've published research on employees in Singapore, as well as some other global kinds of studies. So I understand that there may not be a direct correlation exactly, but I think the principles still fit. We have a training process that we teach HR people and trainers to use with companies. and take them through it. And in that training, we go into a lot of the differences between recognition and appreciation. But for our purposes today, sometimes people say, well, just sort of get it to the main point. What's the primary difference? The main difference is that recognition is about performance, and that's what it was designed to do. And so when somebody reaches a goal, accomplishes something, they're recognized for it, lots of times in front of a large group. And in fact, in most of the trainings I've done, 40% of employees do not want to go up in front of a large group to be recognized. And so that creates problems for them. And also I've had people say, you know, it's good that I'm recognized for my performance, but I hope I have value beyond that. And that's really a core difference for us, is that we believe that appreciation is about the person, that you and I, employees, we're not just producers. We're not just work units. We're people, and we have lives, and we have other personality characteristics that are fun and beneficial, but not necessarily directly related to productivity. And so we want to help fill in the gaps between recognition for performance, which only hits about the top 10 to 15% of all employees, and usually the same group. And then your sort of big middle group of 50 to 60 employees, 50 or 60% of the employees don't hear anything because they're not the top performers, but they still have value. So we want to make sure that we understand it's not solely about performance. Now, the other misconception, another one, is that, you know, what the goal of appreciation is. For a lot of people and leaders, they think the goal of appreciation is to make people feel good, to be happy, and so forth. And I'm going to tell you that's not the primary goal. That's a nice result that happens, but it's not the goal. The goal of appreciation really is to create a healthy, well-functioning organization. It's sort of like having oil in a machine, right? So a machine's got metal parts, they go next to each other, they move. Without oil, there's friction, they don't move as well. It creates heat, maybe even sparks. And so appreciation is really the oil in an organization that helps make it go better. And so, for example, you know, when people feel valued and appreciated, there's a more positive cooperative atmosphere, team members work together well, tasks get done, goals are reached, individuals are motivated to grow, develop, and do their best. Problems are addressed, and challenges. In a book that I wrote called The Vibrant Workplace, we talk about how that a vibrant workplace is not one that doesn't have any problems. Problems come with life, but they're addressed and they're overcome. And that clients and strategic partners, you know, have a positive experience with you. So that's what, you know, we sell, if you will, to business and organizational leaders. Do you want this kind of company and organization? And the answer is yes. And so, okay, let's work on this. So here's some other specifics that are related to research that we cite in our book. And I'm going to offer you the opportunity to get the handout versions of our slides after this. But we know that when staff feel valued and appreciated, it improves their relationships, both between supervisor and employees. Coworkers get along better. It increases employee engagement. We know there's a lot of positive things that go with that. It decreases staff turnover. We know that about 80% of the people who leave an organization say that one of the main reasons they leave is they didn't feel appreciated. It diminishes internal tension and conflict, often over stupid little things that really don't matter that much. Whether they have a window, how big their monitor is, what their schedule is. And when people feel valued, they sort of are more relaxed about those kinds of things. We actually have direct research that shows that when team members feel valued, if we compare an organization that people feel valued and appreciated versus those that don't, they produce more, higher profits, up to 21% more profits. It improves customer satisfaction ratings. And actually managers, leaders enjoy their work more because they're not having to deal with all these other side conflicts and tensions and so forth. So one of the things that wonder about is, what's the number one factor that really affects how much people enjoy their jobs? And the Boston Consulting Group did some research, and one of the things they found it's not money. Now, obviously, we have to be, sort of within the ballpark of what people earn, but most managers, 89% think employees leave for more money. But when you ask the employees, only 12% of the employees say they are leaving for money. So there's a real gap there about why people are leaving. Now, people may get more money, but that's not the reason, because to leave a job takes emotional energy, and it's the lack of appreciation that's the emotional driver that makes that happen. Because what we know is what motivates people and what makes them feel valued and appreciated are two very different kinds of things. Now, secondly, it's not just that recognition is communicated. I mean, and I've had a lot of people say, I got recognized, I got employee of the month or whatever, but big deal. It didn't really matter much. They don't know me. The person who gave me the award doesn't even know me. It feels very, not genuine. And so, again, there's a difference between recognition and appreciation. What's interesting is when I talk to groups, most say, well, we do a pretty good job of recognizing and so forth. But one research across numerous companies saw that 51% of managers believe they do a pretty good job of recognizing employees. And I like this. It feels sort of realistic. It's not 95% of managers saying, hey, I do a great job. It's about half say I do okay. The problem is that only 17% of the people who work for them say that they feel like they're recognized for work well done. So again, we've got this gap. And I think what's happening is managers are doing things, but it's not really hitting the mark for the people they're trying to touch. It's sort of like this woman. She says, if I walk past your desk without stopping to criticize your work, that counts as a compliment. And it's sort of like, if you don't hear anything, you're good to go. Otherwise, I'm going to come yell at you if you're not. And that's not the most positive and helpful way to lead. So the Boston Consulting Group actually did a survey of 200,000 global employees, and they found that feeling appreciated at work is the number one factor that contributes to job satisfaction. So it's really a core piece. And lots of times I'll have companies who have done their internal employee surveys about employee engagement, and they can move different pieces about communication, decision-making, but they can't move that appreciation part. And they come to us and we help them solve that. And I have lots of companies who have been doing this for over 10 years, and we continue to grow because I think there's both a need there and we help meet that need. So the question might come to mind, if appreciation is so important, why is it communicated more? I mean, if it's foundational and it's valuable and good benefits from it, why isn't it communicated more? Well, there's different reasons. One is that a lot of people, especially leaders, believe that employee recognition is sufficient. It's like, why do we need to do this appreciation stuff? We've already got a recognition program. Another one is that they don't know how to. They maybe said thanks or gave somebody a compliment and it maybe didn't really work that well and they don't know what else to do. Third, that it seems sort of fake and put on, that it's just the person sort of going through the motions and not really genuinely appreciating. And so that doesn't hit the mark. And then some people just don't think it's that important. I mean, I've had a number of leaders, more early on would say, we pay our people, that's how we show appreciation. That's fine if that's your approach, but my experience has been the leaders with that kind of attitude tend to have the highest turnover rate. So now I'd like to share a poll, and well, one more is busyness, just that people say, I don't have time to do this. And we're going to talk about busyness here in a second, but let me share a poll, the same questions, and have you answer for yourself. And you can answer more than one option, but answer why you think appreciation isn't communicated more. So if you'll take a moment here to answer that. And it's been interesting to me while you answer that, I'll go ahead and talk a little bit that pretty much the themes are the same for North Americans and Western Europeans. It'll be interesting for me to see how that sort of applies to your situation, given that you all are in different geographic locations. And it's fun for me. Our materials, our book is in, I don't know, 27 languages. We have our inventory in a number of languages as well. And so more and more sort of multinational organizations are using our materials. Great, you guys are doing a good job. I'm going to grab a drink here while you finish that out. And let me give you another 15, 20 seconds, and then we'll end this and see the results. Okay. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to end that so we can talk about it. What's interesting is for you all, almost half, not quite, 44%, indicate that it seems that people don't think it's that important. And there are some very cultural differences. We do some work in China, and depends on the generation there, that the older generation clearly doesn't think it's important, the younger does. But about a quarter of you indicate that it's, employee recognition seems sufficient. Just a little more than that people don't know how to. Lower is about sort of the genuineness part. As we said, the people don't think it's that important is the highest, and then busyness is about 1 out of every 5. And what's interesting to me is that for us in the US and North America, busyness consistently is the highest rated one, with the other sort of being equally distributed across. So that's interesting to me that there's a bit of a difference there. So that's helpful to know. So let me stop sharing that and move on here. So let's talk about this. So as I mentioned, 79%, almost 80% of people who quit their jobs cite a lack of appreciation as a key factor for leaving, because it's important to understand that, especially in a tight job market, you do not want to lose your key team members. And if they don't feel valued, that goes on. Now, what's interesting is, as a psychologist, I do research. I've just had some more published, but I had to sort of get past the issue that this is not that difficult to understand, that not everybody feels appreciated in the same ways as a foundational principle. Most of us say, yeah, I understand that. The problem is that we sort of intellectually assent to it, we agree to it, but that's not necessarily how we act. If I follow you around or somebody else, I'm pretty much going to see them typically do the same 1 or 2 things to everyone. So we sort of treat everybody the same, even though we understand and believe that people do feel valued and appreciated in different ways. And in fact, most leaders believe that for most team members, words are the main way they feel appreciated. And so they focus on that. They compliment or write an email. We actually did some research and found that one of the things that people don't like to hear is good job, because the reality is for over 50% of team members, words are not actually the main way they feel appreciated. And so that's can be a jolt to me. It was like, you can say stuff, but that's going to miss over half of your team members because that's not how they feel appreciated. And the phrase good job is one of the worst things to say because it's just very general. It's vague. It's not very personal. And people just sort of say, yeah, whatever. It doesn't take any time or thought to think about. So this is where the 5 languages of appreciation come in. And for those of you that might be familiar, there's a book called The 5 Love Languages, which my colleague, Dr. Chapman, wrote. It's a great book for personal relationships. It's sold 18 million copies. It's in 50 languages. These languages are the same in name, but they look different practically how they're applied. So words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service, tangible gifts, and physical touch. I'm going to give you just a brief overview, of course, in our training that we actually have an online train the trainer course for. We go deeper onto it. So words of affirmation it's pretty straightforward. They're words that are affirming. They help communicate that you value another person. And so that could be by text, it could be by email, it could be just verbally, personally, one-on-one. Now, 46% of employees, we've had 275,000 people take this worldwide. 46% choose words as their primary one. So it's the biggest group, but it's still less than half, right? But if you don't know somebody's language, that's probably a pretty good guess. It will hit the mark if you do it right. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a little bit. So words are clearly there. Quality time is the second language. And quality time is an interesting one in that as we taught and trained people about this, we found that there's really a couple of different kinds of quality time in large groups. One is sort of individual time, and often with the supervisor, sort of getting input and feedback and maybe some instruction. And that tends to be actually for older employees that they sort of like individual, at least in our culture. Whereas for younger employees, it's more about spending time together. They like to go to lunch together, go out after work, maybe get together for the weekends. So that's where in our inventory, we developed not only identifying the language, but the actions that are specific to that person, because you could get the language right, but miss the action and still not hit the target. And so 26%, about one out of every 4 employees choose quality time. And so for these people, if you just say stuff, but don't ever sort of spend time with them, they don't feel that valued. So it's important to understand that. The third language is acts of service. And acts of service are not sort of rescuing a poor performing employee. They're really small things that help you throughout the week and feel like somebody is paying attention and cares. And probably the best example is when you're working on a time-limited project that you've got to get it done and you're working hard on it. It's what's something that somebody else can do to help you achieve that goal, whether that's that you delegate part of it to them so they can do it, or that maybe you take care of some of their daily responsibilities so that they can keep focused on the project. And I sort of got this picture of this young lady speaking on the phone. Looks like a hotel room. She's maybe calling back. She's working remotely, and getting some help or information from somebody else. Or it could be individual instruction on maybe a program that you don't know how to use well, that somebody can teach you about. And acts of service are important for a number of people, for 22%. So 1 of every 5 employees has acts of service. And it's important to know this because words really don't get it for them. They sort of view words as being cheap. They sort of live by the saying, don't tell me you care, show me. I had one CEO, sort of a cultural phrase. He said, my language is get her done. Don't tell me, don't give me stuff, just help me get things done. And so it's important that way. Tangible gifts. It's important to understand that in our approach, this is not about compensation. It's not bonuses. It's not raises. And sometimes it's hard for business leaders to get their head around. I had this group last week. They said, well, how does promotion and tangible gifts go together, or appreciation? And I said, really, they're separate because you have your performance issues, but tangible gifts are really small things that show that you're getting to know your colleagues. And so for us, it might be bringing in their favorite kind of coffee or their snack that they like. In my office, we like chocolate, so we find out whether they like dark chocolate or milk chocolate. Also, we did some research that showed that one of the top desired gifts are gift cards. But it was interesting that it was different for different groups. Some groups wanted a generic gift card that could be used on Amazon or for another large store. Others wanted a very specific gift cards, let's say to iTunes or to their bookstore, so that they could only use it in that area. So lots of times it's more about, and it's small amounts. It's not a big deal. It's just saying, hey, I know you worked hard on this. Why don't you go take yourself out to a special treat, and do that. So interestingly, gifts is only 6% of the population's primary language. And I've had people tell me, if I get a gift, but I never hear anything positive, I never, nobody checks in to see how I'm doing, never help me out, it feels very, sort of superficial and not genuine. So gifts can be used in combination with those, but by themselves, they don't mean much. Physical touch is obviously an interesting one. It's also an interesting one culturally, right? Because even in the US, we have regional differences where, like in the Northeast, in New York and New Jersey, you know, you don't touch. Whereas in the southern part of the United States, they're more, I would say, warm and physical. We also have like our Latin friends, Southern European Italians who, you know, kiss on the cheeks. And we have then the Japanese and the Chinese that, again, you don't touch. But physical touch, it's here, you know, there's a big issue about being sued for touching inappropriately, which is important. But we're really talking about appropriate physical touch, which is just spontaneous celebration. For us, it might be a high five when you finish a project, maybe a fist bump when you complete a task. It could be a congratulatory handshake when you make a sale. But interestingly, it's less than 1% of the population. So we don't focus on it a lot, but we do say it because it happens, and especially in different regions, it's more common than others. So we talk about it, but it's not a big deal. Now, there's some common challenges in being able to communicate appreciation. First of all, lots of times managers and supervisors feel pretty overwhelmed. There's like, how am I going to do this? I got enough going on. And that's actually related to the third major misconception, that appreciation is the sole responsibility of managers and supervisors. We found that that is not the case, that it's too much responsibility. And that's actually not what people want. People actually want to know that they're valued by their supervisors and their colleagues. And this is true. There seems to be a cultural differences, that it's less about authority and more about peers and colleagues. And so as a result, you know, appreciation is not primarily top down. Recognition is. It's pretty organizational and according to the organizational chart, but appreciation really flows in every direction. Why? Because it's from person to person. It's not from position to position. So what's fascinating about that, not only among peers and colleagues, but across departments. So you can, you know, show appreciation to somebody who in IT who helped get your computer to work right, maybe somebody in accounting who helped, you know, deal with a payment issue or whatever. So it frees it up because it's person to person. And so we know that also the issue of busyness, and that's both managers and supervisors and everybody. We do have people that say, you know, no matter how busy I am, I'm never too busy to stop and complain about how busy I am. And we know we have those people. But one of the things about busyness is that we've actually found that when people feel valued, all the extra things that of dealing with conflict and tension go away. So you actually have more time. And the other part is, as a psychologist, you know, supposed to understand behavior change. So we had to figure out ways to make it not busy. We're not here to create a new to-do list for people. And so we've actually found ways that to help them do what they're already doing or not quite doing and tweak it just a little bit. So when we talk about that, it's that we help teams learn how to communicate appreciation. So we have an online assessment. It's called the Motivating by Appreciation Inventory. It identifies the person's primary language, which let's say was words. Their secondary language might be time. So those two together are quite impactful. Their least valued language, which is important for you as coaches, that's the one that it's not a weakness. It's just not important to them. But the problem is they a leader may have a number of people, let's say if it's acts of service and it's not theirs, but they have a number of people that is theirs, it becomes a blind spot for them, and we have to help them grow. Like I've said previously, we also identify the specific actions within their language and from whom you want those. So let's say getting together to watch sports, you may have your colleagues over, but you don't invite your supervisor. And so then we're able to create a chart for a team and help them see each other's languages. So they learn that, because it's most helpful to know other people's languages, as well as their actions. We have other forms for that. So it's really about a team building approach and helping provide some structure to deal with that. So a key perspective to keep as we talk to people is that it's not that you're asking people to do these things for you. It's not like saying, hey, I haven't heard a compliment this week. Would somebody say something to me? Or nobody's, you know, helping me out on this project. It's more that you're saying, if you want to show appreciation to me or encourage me, this is how you hit the mark. Because we don't want people doing a bunch of things. This is the other way to reduce busyness, is we don't want people to send everybody an email or go check in with everybody, because it's wasteful to do that, because not everybody wants it. So we want to help them not waste time and energy doing something that's not important to the recipient. The third challenge, and I want to talk about this, is how to stay connected with and encourage remote team members. We've had millions and millions of people have to work from home or other remote settings, and especially over time, how do you stay connected? And so there really is a difference between on-site versus remote kinds of relationships and communication. And one of the things that we found is that really appreciation and encouragement are pretty much the same in action. In other words, that you can use both the languages and the actions to help encourage people. But the difference that we found is that appreciation really focuses on the past. You appreciate what they've done or character qualities they've demonstrated, while encouragement focuses on the present and future. And so we can use the 5 languages of appreciation for this remote encouragement. And prior to COVID, we did some research on how remote employees wanted to be appreciated. And then I'm just getting published right now 3 different articles on pre-COVID and during COVID I'll share in a minute. But basically, between people who work remotely and those who work on site, the patterns are similar. Words is number 1, time and acts of service are number 2, but that there's some key issues to effectiveness. One is, in remote settings, you have to be more proactive. You don't have those situations where you're walking down the hall and you stick your head into somebody's office or cubicle and say, hey, how are you doing? Because those don't exist, or you don't see them in the break room or the lunchroom or coming into work. And so you don't have those spontaneous interactions. And so remotely, you have to be proactive. And again, this is a coaching kind of thing you could do with your leaders, of teaching them, okay, have you touched base with Amit or Muhammad, and help them structure how to be proactive about it. Because if you don't do it proactively, it's not going to happen, and then people aren't going to feel valued. The other part about it is that people, including remote people, want to be connected with their peers. It's, like we said, the relationship with their supervisor is fine, but we have to learn how to encourage team interaction. And so in our culture, we'll have set up a time, let's say for a coffee time, where people are actually doing coffee or tea at home, but it's just a chat time for 15 or 20 minutes for people to connect virtually, and set that up. Or we encourage people to reach out to one another. The third part that's really important is that it needs to have some personal component to it, because most remote communication in the workplace is about tasks, right? I mean, you're talking about a project, you're talking about maybe a budget, and it's about getting things done. You don't have those interactions where you're just chatting about this weekend's cricket match, or what your kids are doing, or if you went on a little trip with your family and so forth. And when that happens, if you're just talking about work all the time, then you start to feel like just a work unit, that all they are interested, did you get your work done? Did you get your work done? Versus understanding that you're a person. And so that's a key aspect. For us here, it says, no, I'm not lonely working from home, not since I hired my assistant, Mr. Big Ears. I mean, there's sort of been this deal here in the States about people just being totally isolated, and then they get sort of weird. And so we don't want that to happen. Some implications for you all as coaches is, this whole area is an area where you can help your clients grow in a key soft skill needed to lead effectively. One of the things that we say is, if you can only lead people who are similar to you, who are like you, then you're going to start to gather just a bunch of mini yous around you, which is fine in one sense, but you need team members of different personality types, of different skills, abilities. And so we want to help people lead people who are different than them. And this is a structure to help them. Also, when coaches become familiar with their materials and maybe become a facilitator, they then can use group presentations and training for leaders as an introduction to your competency and value-added skills as a coach. lots of times it's hard for coaches to sort of convince a business leader, that they should pay you to coach when they don't know you. So giving you a format to do a small group presentation or a training for leaders allows them to interact with you and grow in confidence of your abilities. And then third, at least here, a lot of people like assessments and sort of self-discovery assessments. And so it's an inexpensive, practical assessment that you can use to assist your clients, both the leaders and their team members, in understanding themselves and others better. So it's a nice, again, what we would call a foot in the door, being able to sort of get introduced into a setting that it doesn't take a lot of cost on their part. And then it provides options for training, which can be done remotely. We actually, when COVID hit last spring, we created a training version of our appreciation at work training for remote settings, virtual settings, and have that as well. And our assessment, we have an assessment that is remote focused as well, that the actions are ones, whether it's acts of service or quality time, that can be done in remote relationships. And so obviously you need to be able to do that. So the goals for your leaders lots of times are to find out how each of their team members prefers to be shown appreciation. And also we have a version that includes the ways that they don't like, because you don't want to do things that really, maybe make a mistake. Secondly, it helps focus on understanding their colleagues and help them understand about it's important what's going on with their team members personally. And one of the things we train leaders in is not just to ask a bunch of questions. Otherwise, it becomes sort of like an interrogation. What'd you do this weekend? How are your kids? Whatever. But to share some personally. And there's obviously cultural and personal differences about the level of that. But you might say, hey, this weekend I got to go fishing with my brother, and that was sort of fun. Or my kids are able to play soccer again. And so you share a little bit to sort of model and open the door. And then it's important to develop a plan for their team members to support one another, both remotely and on site. Again, if they take on the responsibility of doing this themselves, it won't work and it'll wear them out. That we need to teach and train the team members how to do this. So, some potential action steps. One is, as you think about this, if you're interested in it, it's good to start somewhere with someone. I mean, you don't have to develop a whole, sort of master plan. You can just think about a person that you work with, sort of your right-hand person, that if they didn't do what they did, your day and week would be a lot tougher. It'd be nice to share that. And let's say if, you choose words, let me give you a little map for words. We say, start with the person's name. We like to hear a name. If you're writing it, make sure you spell their name correctly. It doesn't work well. Doesn't feel very genuine if you misspell their name. Secondly, be specific about what they like, what they've done that you value. And then third, tell them why it's important, either to you, to organization, to your clientele. So it might be, I don't know, Sonia, thanks so much for getting the presentation slides done and to me on time, because that way it really helps me be able to sort of finalize the presentation and go talk to this group versus, just getting it at the last minute. So tell her name, what she did that you value, and why it's important. And then the other part for you all is to maybe explore using available resources. We've created a number of resources that are there to help both you and leaders to apply this. To me, if it's just information, it's meaningless. It really needs to be applied. And so that's been our goal. Now, if you would like slide handouts from this, and also I can send you a sample report of the inventory, just email me at yesdrpaul@gmail.com and put CTA for the Coach Transformation Academy in the subject line, because I do speak to different groups and I want to know what presentation I gave to you and get you the right handouts and also get you an inventory report. So yesdrpaul@gmail.com, put CTA in the subject line and I'll send those out to you. Okay. So just a conclusion, and then we'll move to questions. One fairly successful businessman in the state said, the way to develop the best that's in a person is by appreciation and encouragement. You can have, it's sort of like having a raw diamond, that's in the rough. And the way that you sort of hone it and shape it into something beautiful and quite valuable is by appreciation and encouragement. So there's that. And let me move to questions and comments. And also, if you just want to visit our website, it's appreciationatwork.com. It's the word at, and again, you can see all the different resources we have. So Mahmoud, there we are.
Thank
And
you,
I
Dr.
will.
Paul, for this rich presentation, and we are looking for questions now. So if you have any questions, please write them on the chat box. I'm going to read them to Dr. Paul.
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead, please.
First of all, I want to thank Dr. Paul. Thank you so much for the amazing presentation.
You bet. You're welcome.
And I've read The 5 Love Languages. It's an amazing book, and I'm looking forward to reading this book, to be honest.
Great.
First of all, I wanted to ask you, wouldn't it be better to maximize the performance of employees? Just wanted to ask you, whose job would it be to tackle every self-limiting belief and all the fears that our employees have in the company? Because at times, people will be demotivated from certain stuff. For instance, someone is not liking the relationship with their wife and he's having problems at home. Of course, he's going to be demotivated at work. Whose job is it to talk to them and give them advice?
Well, I would say the first thing is less about advice, and that one of the, so my master's thesis, so I have a PhD, I did research master's, and then actually my PhD dissertation was on the effectiveness of counselors. And one of the key components, that's actually like the biggest component for effectively helping people, is to help them feel understood and heard. So I would say less about trying to solve the problem and work really hard with active listening skills of feeding back to them to make sure you understand the situation correctly, factually, then also their feelings, and say, man, it sounds like you're really distressed about your relationship with your wife. And usually when you do that, then they keep talking more and tell you more about it, and you just listen. And then for me, even me, because I don't do much individual counseling anymore, is I will then seek to find the best referral for them. Not that I'm going to solve it, but I say, I know a good marriage therapist that might be helpful to you. Would you be interested in having that person's name and contact information? So I would really steer clear, because it's so complicated about trying to help people in different specifics and cultural issues and all that. So I would say work on helping them feel understood. That's what the core of empathy is, right? Is to help them feel understood, and then try to identify a good resources to refer them to.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. And I think it's quite interesting, as many companies actually are spending a lot of money to recognize employees, but the results actually are not that much.
Right. Exactly. I mean, you can talk to somebody who just got recognized and say, how do you feel like you're really valued and appreciated? And say, not really. I mean, it's sort of like, yeah, it was nice, but they don't really know what I do to help, the organization.
So we have Robin here, raise his hand. Yes, Robin, go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Dr. Paul. Quick question. It appears that if recognition, as you have defined it, is not as effective for the long haul or for the intrinsic happiness or satisfaction, is that something that is essentially now redundant if appreciation can replace it?
Well, I think recognition has its place. And let me tell you, one of the reasons that corporations and companies gravitate towards it, because it's easily scaled, right? Recognition is a process, a program that can be sort of manufactured. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but that you can set up a structure, you do it every year, you have goals and standards. And so it's easy to implement. And that's actually one of the, I would say, downsides of appreciation, is that it's not just about, and for us, we talk about authentic appreciation. And so, in fact, I just wrote a blog that came out a week or so ago about what do you do if you don't appreciate somebody? And we say, we don't want you to just, fake it. And so it has a heart issue, right, about it, which makes it more difficult, but it's also more meaningful. So I think, especially we want people to do the right things. We want them to get back to a customer within 24 hours, or we want them to answer the phone cheerfully or whatever. So I think sort of monitoring and rewarding those is a good thing, but that's that goal. I mean, it's for that purpose rather than to help them feel valued.
We have a question from Eddie as well. Go ahead, Eddie, please. Eddie?
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. I want to thank you, Dr. Paul. This is very interesting. I take it personally interesting. I'm getting to understand that, appreciation, like you rightly said, deals with the past. And then encouragement deals with the present and anticipate, a future of blessedness, sort of. Now, what do you do when encouragement, the way you intend to have it on a particular worker or set or group of workers, you have struggled to encourage, but what you are doing, instead of becoming motivational, is rather bringing about complacency. Somebody feels, okay, because you encourage, you do not have what it takes to instill discipline because you have to encourage them. Mm-hmm. I don't know how far somebody needs to take encouragement. And at what point do you say, okay, let's break it off here and deal with matters that correct an anomaly?
Right. So essentially, if I'm understanding the context correctly, it's really about the question about what's the relationship between low performance and appreciation? Do you show appreciation or encouragement to somebody who's really not doing their work effectively, right? Great. Okay. So which is great. And it's an issue we deal with all the time. And that is appreciation, if it's about the person, is not always work related. Now, I actually had to work through this with one of my team members. I'm trying to show appreciation, but he's not doing what I want him to do. And so it was on me to manage that work relationship well, as far as the task, communicating it, monitoring, and following up. So performance was here, and I can appreciate that. But sometimes, especially when people are either new or they're struggling, you're trying to find something at work to appreciate. So sometimes it's not work related. Sometimes we appreciate. I like to work with cheerful people more than grumpy people personally. And so, if somebody has a fun sense of humor or a nice laugh, I might just tell them appreciation about that, how they just really sort of light up the room. Or it can even be outside of work, that maybe I have a team member who's training for, a half marathon or something. And I say, man, that's cool. You have the self-discipline to do that. I don't have that right now. So it's about them, or maybe a single mother who's really committed to her kids. And you say, I'm just so impressed with how much you are committed to your kids and you love them. It's not about work, but they still feel valued. Now, in a separate conversation, and this is key, it's separate. You need to say, man, Maria, let's pick, we need to work on getting here on time, not only in the morning, but back from breaks, back from lunch, that they maybe just have that sort of style of not being timely. So we separate the performance issue from the appreciation, and it's important to keep the conversation separate. Otherwise they hear it and put them together. So there's more about that, but hopefully that at least in an introduction. Okay.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank you. We still have a couple of minutes if we
And
have.
while there's a little break here, let me just say about the research we just completed. We did an evaluation of the people who've participated with our inventory and compared remote employees and on-site employees pre-COVID, during COVID. So, and were there any changes? And also we looked at age groups. And what was interesting, it somewhat surprised me. My wife said it shouldn't have surprised me, but it did, in that we found that really the person's setting and life circumstances didn't really change their preference much. That people pre-COVID and during COVID had the same frequency rate of choosing one of the languages, words or time or acts of service, the same. So it wasn't according to the stress, or even if they were remote or on site, they were almost exactly the same as far as what people want. A key sort of the implication of that is that how we want to be shown appreciation really is part of who we are. And we take that with us regardless of our circumstances. Now, there's some circumstances we know that things change a little bit, like if you're in a very sort of crisis stress situation, we know in our culture, at least, spending time with and acts of service tend to pop up because that's how you show support to people. But then after the crisis, it goes down. So it's interesting to me that it doesn't change much. And also that we need to remember, we're talking about groups of people, that the key is to find out how that individual wants to be shown appreciation, because we can have a 20-something who typically like time more and don't like gifts, but you could have a 20-something who likes gifts. And so you have to find out what they value rather than just taking the group data and applying it that way.
Yeah, there was a last question in the chat box, Dr. Paul, which is about the role of a coach or HR practitioner.
Yeah.
If management see appreciation as a waste of time, what will a coach do?
So the best thing to do is really to get them accurate information. So like there's other places, but the key in chapter 2 of our book, we have 50 research citations that lay out, the improvements that happen in an organization. You have to help them understand the goal. I'm not here just to make them feel good, or happy. It's here to help the organization work better. And so you want to show them, whether that's research or some stories that we share on our website from podcasts or whatever, you need to start to educate the leaders. And the way that we found to really help organizations the best is not to try to do a whole organizational implementation. It's not going to happen. I can't even get it to happen. So what you do is you want to say, let's start with a pilot group. Let's start with a small group that maybe the leader is at least open, right? I mean, they're not against it. And let's start with his or her team and apply this and see how it goes. And what we found, with Miller Coors, a brewing company here, with DirecTV, it starts small and then it grows. So don't try to sell the whole deal, but just see if you can get a foothold on a small group as an example.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paul. It was a very rich presentation. I really enjoyed it myself. I'm sure all of our members here actually have enjoyed it as well.
Great.
So, I think there is maybe an additional question. Appreciation employee, right or not? If we appreciate an employee.
I saw that briefly. Is that it's maybe the fairness issue? What people react that somebody else is appreciated and they're not?
Yeah.
Sometimes we have that issue brought up about, well, what they get a gift, you get them a gift card and you write me an email, is that fair? And I always say to the supervisor or the leader, say, it's a great opportunity to say, I'm sorry that you feel that way. My goal is to show appreciation to you in the way that's meaningful. From what we had, I understood it was words, but if this is more important to you, I'm glad to know that, and I'm going to work at applying that. So you always turn it into, this is a great opportunity for me to hit the need that you have identified.
Oh, thank you so much again, Dr. Paul. We have, unfortunately, the time passed quickly. So thank you so much for this presentation. We have really enjoyed it. And thank you of all of you for those who attended this presentation. It's there in the CTA Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and everywhere. Have been published here in the chat box, and it will be shared with all of you in key bullets and this presentation as well through your emails. Thanks again to Dr. Paul and all of you, and see you next Tuesday with a new Transformational Tuesday. Okay.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Mhm.